You started as a tax specialist and an advisor.
It was not pre-planned. This is a subject I love and I will build my career around it. I practiced international tax for 35 years.
How did you then move, during your career from sort of technical expertise into boardroom position?
Whenever there is an opportunity that knocks on the door, you must raise your hand and
Fabulous.
take that opportunity. It would not be fair if I did not do that myself. I'm a lifelong learner and I knew I would start from, base zero on that, but I thought I could learn my way through. You do need the people skills. I think that is like the base. You must be able to, relate to people. And also in order to kind of motivate and inspire them.
There are always challenges in execution. So how do you deal with that?
Never say no to any leadership roles. Learn to delegate. Then you can have as much time as you need. If it comes to, pushing any agenda, I'm all in for innovation. Trying to push the envelope a little more that what if we were to let this happen? What if we were to take that opportunity?
Joining us today, Shefali Goradia, Chairperson at Deloitte South Asia. In 2023, Shefali made history, being nominated as the first woman to chair a board in a Big Four firm in India. Now that is a huge milestone and one that's not just a personal achievement, but also broadened the scope of leadership and representation within the profession. Shefali, thanks so much for joining us. It's fabulous to have you with us. I know how busy you are, and it's great to get a chance to sit down with you. Now, let's look at your journey because I think it's fascinating. You started as a tax specialist and an advisor, and you were deeply immersed in the technical side of things. Firstly, it's not a choice that many women take. I mean, there are, of course, lots of successful women in tech and in finance. However, it's not the first choice necessarily for many. What made you choose this path? And how did you then move, during your career from sort of technical expertise into boardroom positions?
Yeah. Thank you, Aabha. Thank you for having me on the show. I would say that, yes, it was not pre-planned.
Okay.
When I did my chartered accountancy, I always thought that, yes, this is a subject I love and I will build my career around it. And I did that. I practiced international tax for 35 years.
Wow.
And
That's mind-blowing. Yeah.
and slowly, gradually, it is because, when you're working in professional service field, you work with clients, you work with people, and eventually somewhere slowly the transition happens when you start aligning more and more with the organization that you're with. And then eventually, whatever are the priorities for the organization, I think that starts taking the precedence. And when the opportunity came, and I thought that, I keep mentoring a lot of women, and I tell them that whenever there is an opportunity that knocks on the door, you must raise your hand and
Fabulous.
take that opportunity. And I thought that it would not be fair if I did not do that myself. And so I said it was time to take a plunge. I'm a lifelong learner. And I knew I would start from, base zero on that, but I thought I could learn my way through. And eventually you're dealing with people. So I think it's somewhat similar, but and very interesting field.
I was going to ask you that are there certain skills that hold you in good stead? And you mentioned people. Does everyone have to be good with people? There are assumptions, especially that if you're perhaps on the technical side, you won't need those people skills. But clearly, to grow, you do.
I think more so in today's world than ever before.
Okay.
You do need the people skills. I think that is like the base. Like how your technical skills are the base, even your people skills, basic communication skills, they are the base. But eventually, if you see, I think in professional services, you are dealing with people. And especially in terms of, any leadership position. You must be able to, relate to people, whether it is your clients, your people within the organization, your business leaders. You have to be able to relate to them, to be able to represent them wherever you're going. And also in order to kind of motivate and inspire them towards achieving certain common organizational goals. So that I think, as you start growing in your leadership roles, I think that becomes more and more critical.
Okay. Now, you've been known as a problem solver. Yeah. You seem to have this reputation. Tell us a little bit more about that and your unique leadership style.
I think it goes way back when I was in school, and I always used to love solving math puzzles, and it was the classic thing that when the professors would start solving it from left hand side, and you try to equal it to the right hand side, and I always try from the opposite side to see if I can reach there before the teacher does. So, but it's something that this is a skill that you can apply across everything that you do, whether it is managing a household task, or let's say pulling off a wedding in the family. It's a puzzle.
Sure.
How do you solve the puzzle? The same way how when any task before the organization, how do you, like for example, how do you build the pipeline for the women in the organizations, right? So it's a puzzle, and how do you solve for it, right? So you get all your stakeholders aligned, and you work towards step by step transitioning, aligning everybody onto the same goal and working towards it, and then execution to the T,
And
right?
that's the key, isn't
so you
it?
have to keep an eye on it to make sure that whatever you are designing in terms of the strategy and the plan is being followed and pursued, and it's delivering result.
I mean, there are always challenges in execution. So how do you deal with that? How do you ensure you have the right team or you have the right practices? How do you manage trade-offs where you say, okay, I'll compromise on this as long as that's going well?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that, when I was a technical partner,
Yeah.
I had a little different style when it came to anything.
Right.
You see, if I saw that something was not working, I was not getting the right quality, I was not getting the right, approach to anything, I would just roll up my sleeves and start working myself. But now that I'm in the board role and the chair role, there is a very clear-cut, demarcation between the management and the governance.
Right.
So now
Interesting.
I have changed my approach a little bit, because now I try to, of course, on some of the aspects, we also proactively engage with the management, but largely it is an oversight and a stewardship role. So we keep a tab on how is it going, and wherever the management needs any help, it's, we are there as a board. But we definitely don't get into execution anymore.
Okay.
So I think now, depending again on the role, you do need to tailor that a little bit.
So were there pivot points in your career which signaled to you that you were moving in this direction, or where you chose that, okay, I can see myself in that role, or I can have more of an impact in that role, and I'll move towards stewardship, I'll move towards, leading the way in that respect?
So definitely I would say that when I switched my track from our tax technical field to governance, that was the biggest pivot in my life. And I think the reason why I chose that track was also, because I saw that as an opportunity to make a bigger impact.
Okay.
Because, while I was doing tax technical work, it was largely an impact for my clients.
Sure.
But when I was in a governance role, and especially in a field such as, the Big Fours, where it is, very rare, and, it's not that common for women, women to rise up to that level.
Yeah.
So it's more, I saw that as an opportunity that it can really make a difference.
You're one of the how many few women leaders across Deloitte?
I think we have, I think Deloitte is doing better on that. Yeah. So in my board itself, I have 25% women.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I would like more, but at least it's a good
better
start.
Than the industry average, or in line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And see, for professional service firms, we have women at the entry level, which is almost as high as 50%. It's only as they, go through the careers that they start, somewhere taking a back seat. The family takes a priority, and then they don't, go all the way up, or at least a fewer of them go all the way up.
And I'll come back to that. But in the leadership positions and in the boardroom positions, and you said, no, you have in many of them, but still, if you step back and look at it globally and look at the kind of rooms that you have, as you said, there are still very few women that make it into those roles. Were you intimidated? Was it daunting for you to take that step? You're giving me that smile that says you weren't.
I don't think so. Daunting, no, because see, I think somewhere, it's all about entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And you have to take some risk.
Sure.
And once you, you step up for that position, you know that you are taking that leap of faith. So then you have to be ready, mentally you're ready for it. And it all goes back to, how prepared you are for that role, right? And many a times it so happens that, when you get that position, you may not be absolutely ready. But when you enter any meeting, you have to make sure that you are prepared. You should be at least as prepared, if not better, than any other person in the room. And then that kind of gives you that confidence and ability to hold your ground and navigate. And then once you're able to do that, then there's no reason to get intimidated. But again, I would say that it's not that easy for women yet, because of course they are in minority in any boardroom.
Sure.
And again, it depends on the culture of the organization. But in many boardrooms, we've seen that, even if they have women on board, they are hardly one or two. And then that's in itself not enough for them to be able to voice out their views openly.
Sure.
So it's all about, whether the organization has that inclusive culture, they respect diversity. And, the rest of the people in the room, are they doing enough to give that psychological safety to women on the board? Then they can really thrive and contribute to the best of abilities.
Did you have any such instances, in your personal experience, whether with, you did.
On the
I think you and I are having our own side conversation.
I
through
know,
our,
okay, I know where you're going on that. So,
well, anything you'd like to share that makes it easier for some other women who are aspiring for this to understand what actually goes on and that they can overcome it?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I think, because I came from a Gujarati household and, we were all brought up thinking that, your family is the top priority.
Sure.
So even though I was a gold medalist chartered accountant, I had a thriving career, but I could just leave it all and go if anything, my family needed.
Okay.
Right. So I always had that thought that, while my children were growing up, that should I just, move to part-time role and, give them some more time. And, that guilt that all working mothers live with in terms of, whether are they able to spend enough time with their children.
I think it's really important to bring this up. Yeah.
So that guilt is, sometimes really overbearing, and which is when you need some mentors around to help you through that phase.
Sure.
And I was fortunate to have a mentor.
It really helps, doesn't it?
It really does, because, he told me all the time that, yes, hang in there. I had my psychological safety. My boss always told me that if you want to take time off, you can always take the time off. But, because I had that flexibility, it was easy for me to not take the time off because I knew that I could always do that if I wanted to. Now I think the work culture is changing across the organizations, right? I think there is a lot more flexibility. Work from home as a concept did not exist, at that point in time. But the mentors who really held my hand and, got me to hang in there and also taught me some basic skill sets, that, for example, you said one of the things that I always remember and I always, paid forward is that never say no to any leadership roles.
Amazing.
Okay, and now that's because, women by nature are a little hesitant.
Yes.
They feel that if I take that role and then if I'm not able to do full justice, what would happen?
Absolutely.
Right? So that imposter syndrome is always there.
No room to fail.
No room to fail, right? You are perfectionist. You have to do a perfect job on that. But at the same time, how do you make time? Because any leadership role needs more time than just what is a desk job requires. So that is sometimes often, a restraint.
Yeah.
And I was taught very early that, learn to delegate. If you can learn to delegate, then you can have as much time as you want.
But we don't delegate, right? Everyone's a control freak because everybody's a perfectionist. Everyone wants to do it just right themselves.
No, so I would say that I think that is one piece that I cracked early enough in my career.
What is the secret?
That, it's building my A team around me.
Right.
Because, I like to see them as agile, and as quick on their feet as, my simple principle was that a client cannot know of a thing before you. Right? So you must be ahead of the client when in terms of any new development in the field of tax and that is how, building that fire in your belly, right? That how is it that none of your clients are appearing on the first page of the newspaper?
Sure.
So what are you doing
Sure.
to get there
I
in
like
front of the
that, yeah.
clients?
Gives us an insight into your work.
Yeah. So that helps in building that strength in the team, that then you know that you can count on, that you know that even if you step away, that your clients will still be delivered with as much rigor and as much technical expertise as you would like.
And it's a tough world at the moment, given the kind of regulations, the kind of changes constantly, keeping up to date on all of them, having teams to cross-check each other. I think with the new laws, it's everything has become even more complex as we go along.
That's part of the reason why I love tax.
Okay.
Because it's always most complex and it's always changing. So there's always something new to learn, and you can always be ahead of the game. So it's a new opportunity.
True. Okay. I love the optimism and and I love the way that you look at everything as an opportunity. I think that's a great attitude to have. Tell me, in terms of when you're dealing with so many of these clients, and there is so much pressure on, the Big Four, as being one of these, to deliver, as you said, to make sure that everything is, absolutely on point. How do you ensure that dealing with some of these stakeholders, that you're managing their expectations? And I'm sure most of these companies have male leaders that you're engaging with. For the most part, you're also dealing with a lot of listed companies, for example. What is the kind of nature of the beast in terms of the number of CEOs, the kind of stakeholders that you have to manage, the expectations that they have? Is it stressful? How does that play out for you in your role on a day-to-day basis?
I think in any a corporate organization, whether it is a professional service firm or a business organization, I think stress at the leadership level is almost given.
Okay.
Right? No matter what you do, no matter how strong your team is, there will always be situations. But I think that is where there are two things that really count in. One, of course, you have confidence in the team that you have built, right? You know that they would do the ace job, right, in front of the clients, or anybody that they are meeting with, or representing the firm in the outside world. And then the second is a culture that if something went wrong, that ultimately it is your responsibility. And so long as you are giving them that safety net, that if something happens, you will not just paste it on them and leave them high and dry, but you will stand in with them and fight through the crisis and make sure that together as a team you come out of it. So just that collaboration and stepping in with them and giving them that level of comfort that the leadership is with them.
Nice.
I think that makes a big difference. So here's where the culture of the organization really plays a big role.
Plays a big role, and I think that's also taking on a lot of onus as a leader to be there as a rock. Were there a lot of expectations that you found, even again being a woman leader in your role, from those that look up to you in terms of younger women in the organization or those that are aspiring to move into leadership roles? Were they looking at you as a beacon, as
and not just within the organization, even outside. Like, I mean, it's been now, 3 years since I have, taken this role. And I do find many women, approach me and they talk about it. And I think some of them, they struggle just how to navigate, their career path within their organization, right?
Exactly.
And, what have we done differently in order to support the women? And we often talk about something called a sponsorship wave, which is, that every leader is expected to sponsor a few women from their organization. That means that they are not just there to, answer their questions when they have anything, or, meet them once a year, but they actually take charge of their career. And they will proactively guide them, through their organizational kind of track to make sure that they get a right leadership role, they get exposure. I mean, and it is everybody's own choice whether they want that role or not. But it shouldn't be for the, just for the sake that somebody thought that, the women cannot do that role. So that is where I think the role of the sponsors really, really matters.
And these are both male and women?
Both male and women, so, yes. And we've seen some of the male be excellent sponsors.
they're willing and they don't see it as a cut, like just a tick mark.
Not at all, no. I think it's changing. It's changing really, really drastically. And even in some of the more conventional industries, we do see the women leaders come up.
Okay.
It depends again on the industries. I mean, you see more of them in financial service industry, like in banking, you see a lot of women who come up,
Yes.
right? And many of them, it's also, how the leadership, the tone at the top, if that is more inclusive, more encouraging for diversity and supporting all the women, I think it will just percolate through down.
Do you think it's changed? There was an era in banking, for instance, where we saw a lot of women leaders. And I'm asking you this because there's been a lot of conversation around it, how there
Yes.
seems to be one wave that's retired and perhaps a little bit of a gap. And there are now many more leaders like yourselves who are moving into these roles and building culture and a new kind of inclusiveness. What do you feel are the things that stand out? What is different today? Why, for instance, did we have that
Gap.
Yes.
I think it's sometimes, it so happens that you have a batch and then there is suddenly a vacuum because people feel that, okay, there is already a, somebody at the top. But I think it's not something which is very, kind of systemic. It will get over. I mean, eventually it is, ultimately, you have to build your domain expertise.
Okay.
And the women who've been able to do that, there is always a role for them, whether it is in the leadership, whether it is in their boardroom. You see there are so many new opportunities these days.
Right.
So for the right candidates, if you know your domain well, you will always have an opportunity for that.
Do you think, like for instance, you mentioned family, and that's always a constant challenge in balancing all these objectives. Do you think that there are women who are also choosing perhaps, whether it's what are some of these trend words like micro-shifting or gig economy or freelancing, for a simpler word, or just choosing alternative paths because they don't want to give that kind of time to a professional, like a large corporate professional career? Do you think that corporates themselves can structurally change certain things? I'm not sure if that's possible in a company like...
that's a bigger problem to solve, Aabha, because while I do see, and there has always been that inclination, right? Because if you have more flexible work hours, that means that you can still do, you spend time with your family, and you also have time to spend on something that you enjoy doing.
Absolutely.
But and now the organizations do facilitate that, right? There are sabbaticals. There are also many programs which help the women get back into the organization once they are ready to go back into mainstream. But I mean, that's not, I mean, gig economy, yes, but I think ultimately when you have to really look at your long-term career, I think then all these just have to be very, very short-term things.
Okay.
And I'm always worried about women who might just get caught up in that trap. It's difficult for them to get out of it then. It's okay to take the sabbatical, to take short, breaks.
That's important, yeah.
But it's also equally important that once you have, handled your task at hand, you need to get back into mainstream. Because only then you get noticed, only then you will rise in your careers. Otherwise, it's, there'll always be a little, plan B, where you have to settle for, lesser known roles.
So I've seen women up to about, or people in general, it's not necessarily just around genders, take a break of up to about 2 years and come back. But I'll ask you this, for women who, let's say, go on maternity, and let's say the organization is waiting for them to come back after 6 months, right? How much more room would you give that employee? Let's say if they said that, I want the rest of the year, maybe unpaid, but keep that space for me.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon at all. In fact, now many companies do give that extra room because, like I said, it's all an individual circumstance, right? If somebody's family has, more of a extended support, they are okay coming back after 6 months. And there are some nuclear families who don't have that support. They might need a little more time. So I think that is not unreasonable ask. I think, and again, like I said, it all depends on, what have you done? Like, what have you achieved? And so if you have something to offer, then there will always be somebody who will be willing to place that bet on you. And they will give you that extra time to, to handle your family and then come back.
How much of the culture is shaped by global practices and how much is shaped by what is culturally true here in India? The reason I ask is, for instance, certain progressive policies like paternity.
Yes.
Right? What if you're giving 6 months to the woman, but you also give 6 months to the man?
Yes.
Is that possible?
6 months is a little too much, because clearly the expectation from the father
Is different.
from
Yeah.
that from the mother. But certainly there is a case
More
for
than 2
paternity
weeks,
leave.
maybe 3 months,
Yes,
4
yeah,
months.
and whenever required, right? I mean, I would rather look at it this way, that if the woman needs to get to work because there is some very important meeting happening, by all means the father should get the paternity leave to sit with the child.
Sure.
So that by all means is there, and I think more and more we are seeing that there is a global knowledge exchange on this, right?
Okay.
Because the multinationals are there, they follow common policies, in many parts of the
Sure.
world. And then there are other organizations that also equally learn from them and are able to adopt some of the best practices.
Got it.
So I think that while it's not blindly being followed everywhere, but there is a lot of, understanding and knowledge exchange on it.
Okay.
And of course, then, you have to adapt to your country's requirements.
Exactly.
There are local laws that you have to comply with. And you could have, depending on the industry and the role, you could have different situations.
Okay.
So that is real. But I would say that more so today than ever before. There is a lot of understanding, and the companies are adopting the best practices when it comes to, giving women time off.
Okay. Collateral impact from what we're seeing globally.
No, I think, see, one thing is, of course, once something is inbuilt in an organization's culture, one country's policy cannot really change that. Right? And it is, we have to believe that this is a right thing for you to do. It's not a, a policy kind of diktat.
Yeah.
So long as you believe that this is a right thing for your organization to do, to give, equal opportunities to women, you would do it. Now, you may label it as DEA, you may not label it. But at least eventually you will give equal opportunities to all, because there is now, a lot of data to prove that the more diverse your workforce, the more diverse your boardroom, that you will have a better outcome in terms of how you take certain decisions.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I don't think people can still fully believe or have that conviction or resonate with what women leaders bring to the table. Or when we're talking diversity, it could also be different backgrounds, contexts, perspectives. What do you feel when it comes to women specifically are our strengths? Yes. And what can we bring to boardrooms? How do you see that happening? I know you mentor a lot of people into boardroom roles, for example. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So when it comes to women in the boardroom, I think, again, I go back to the same point that I made, that it should not just be a seat being filled, right? Or a quota, that, you need a minimum one woman director and therefore you need to have somebody. I think it should be more, even though it starts off that way, but soon you have to, make that shift and try to make it more diverse, not just from gender perspective. Right. It's, it is gender, age, skill set. It's an overall cognitive diversity that we would like to see in the boardroom. But when it comes to women, I think many of them still struggle, because, there are a few women who are highly, recognized in the industry, and they get multiple, opportunities for the boards, whereas there are many other women who struggle to find the right boards, for them.
Right.
And I think it's all about how should they be able to, showcase their knowledge expertise, because they have to be able to contribute something to the board and not just be there and agree with all the decisions, right? So if they are able to show that, they have a certain unique skill set that they are able to contribute with, or if they have a good understanding of the industry that the company operates in, then that naturally puts them, on a better footing when they are pitching for a boardroom. And then, of course, overall, if you network, I think that's another thing that women don't do enough.
How do you create that path? Because a lot of women don't know where to begin. They don't know how to really get the word to the right place. They wouldn't even know that someone's looking. They wouldn't know where to start.
Right.
Like not somebody who's possibly within a corporate, but even someone who's outside of a corporate.
Yeah, so we actually do that. I think at Deloitte, we run something called a SheExO program, which helps the women, who are in leadership journey. And we help them through different roles. It's not just for the CEO. It could be for a CFO role, it can be for a CEO role.
Lovely.
And we help them slowly, gradually, rise through that.
Okay.
And we run this in cohorts. And there is a natural opportunity to network amongst women. And I can only, stress more the need for such a networking platform, because the women do need that platform.
Sure.
They do need that, something that is facilitated for them to meet and learn from different women, because they hear somebody say something and it strikes a chord, and then that will keep them going. That okay, you handled it in a certain way. Okay, I think I can give it a try in my organization, and I can also do it. And then eventually, at some point, all of them are going to be leaders, right? So it's always, good to know somebody right from the early start in their journeys. But I think these kind of networking platforms, not just at the corporate level, but even in the industry and even outside the industry, now there are many organizations who do run that.
Okay. Well, we also try to do
your
certain knowledge
platform, of
sessions,
course.
and maybe we'll collaborate on
Yes.
some of those together, because I think it's a very, very relevant topic, and a lot of women still have many questions around this, and really how to fill more of those. No,
seats. And obviously, see what you are doing through your portal, and the videos that you are putting out. Right? I mean, there is that itself is a good opportunity, a learning opportunity for many to kind of view and learn from that, right?
Sure.
So, and then of course, the networking is something that you can do anywhere. I am not saying that you only need to network amongst women.
Exactly.
You need to find time. That I think that is a more critical part.
Yes.
Because generally women
hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Downplay that. They say, okay, I can finish my work and then I have to go back. But they need to make time for networking.
Got it. I wanted to somehow encapsulate Shefali's leadership lessons or success mantras. The idea of being real, rare, and responsible, it really comes through in your leadership philosophy. If you had to articulate your key leadership lessons, what would they be?
I think in terms of leadership lessons, I would say first, curiosity and the learning, the urge to learn and keep learning. I think that is something that really keeps me going, no matter what role I do. But I'm always looking to see, what can I learn more today? Read about something that, just triggers some thoughts.
It's so brilliant to hear this after the many years that you have spent building your career. For you to say this really reinforces, what we always say, that one should have a passion for learning.
Yeah, because that keeps you, young at heart, and it also actually expands your horizons so much. And, you learn from others. You sometimes learn from, your children, right? You learn from your junior team members,
Absolutely.
How they are navigating their journey. So learning is one of the most important thing. And the second thing, I would also talk about time management.
Yes.
Because that is very important for our women especially, that
everyone's still trying to crack it.
Correct, yeah. But I think, so, and this is something that I used to tell my team, that, once you put something down on paper, it's half done. So it's always, the minute, you make your to-do, you list your tasks, so you know that you're not dropping the ball on anything. And then once it is in front of you, you can keep prioritizing, reprioritizing.
Sure.
So that helps you manage your time better.
Music to my ears. I follow the same
Yeah.
philosophy. I think it really works. Yeah. When you are looking into the future and you're imagining boardrooms of the future, what would be the key changes that you would like to see, that you're also playing a critical part in shaping today? And what is the legacy that you'd like to leave behind?
So definitely far more diverse boardrooms than there are today. And I've said that it's a cognitive diversity, not just gender-based. Yeah. So, but certainly more women, because that's one of the very big part of diversity for us. I would like to see, not just the public companies who have the mandatory requirement to have women on board, even the other groups and companies and promoter-led companies. I do want to see more women on board. I would also like to see technology play a bigger role than they do today. So whether, there are talks about, having AI, as a board member.
That's true.
And, and I think you have the benefit so long as you know how to really manage the technology well. But certainly that is a way to go, because the rate at which the new developments are happening, and almost every organization is dealing with the technological disruptions and the supply chain impact as a result of that, and how to navigate that, and whether the companies are well equipped. Are they really adopting technology at the pace that they must? Are they doing enough about the displacement of the employees? All of those decisions get taken at the boardroom. So definitely far more educated and updated board is something that should also be seen. And then lastly, I think there is something that needs to be done about the information overload, because a lot of documents and information is put up to the board right before the meeting, and there are many directors who do not have enough time because they are juggling with different responsibilities. So a little bit management around it, so that we have a more structured way of providing information and managing the data and information symmetry in the board.
Shefali, how many employees do you manage? I mean, and how many in the company, and how many men in the boardrooms or in your leadership teams report to you?
So we have about 40,000 employees. And we have a structure where we have a CEO who is a man, and he's the one who manages everybody. But in the boardroom, we have about 25% women. So around 75% are still men. But all of us work together as a team, right? It's a stewardship role. It's a joint responsibility, because the 12 of us in the board are representing 1,000+ partners.
Wow.
So it is a role that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I would still say, Aabha, it's not about men reporting to women or women reporting to men.
I was just trying to visualize this boardroom, and I think
it is all about what weight you carry, right?
I love
and what difference are you able to make? Because
that's just it.
if you can do something different, if you can do something better, then you would see that automatically, whether it's a man or a woman, you will start seeing that respect in their eyes.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And when you're talking about influence and shaping narratives, shaping the future, what are some of your key passion points or roles, or some of the things that you're known to push in those meetings or forums?
I think it's generally always, if it comes to pushing any agenda, I'm all in for innovation. Because I do feel that sometimes at the board level we tend to get a little more conservative. And given India's position at the macroeconomic level, the rate at which we are growing, and the sustained growth over such a long period of time, if we don't have that mindset of innovation, we will suffer. And therefore, I'm always, trying to push the envelope a little more, that what if we were to let this happen? What if we were to take that opportunity?
You're a risk taker.
I am a risk taker, yes.
Fabulous.
I am. But at the same time, with the board, board role, you also have to play the devil's advocate, right? So you have to build the guardrails so that you are not exposing the larger organization to risk. But at the same time, you have to keep pushing forward with the innovation agenda.
Fantastic. Shefali, thank you so much for joining us. I think there's just so much to learn from you, and I hope this is the first of many such conversations. We look forward to continuing to gain from your knowledge and perhaps mentoring many of our viewers and members today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show, and nice speaking to you.